Welcome to the 15th episode of Ahargana. I am back in my favorite river. You're right, I am back in the Kaveri. And I am standing literally in the Kaveri. I am standing on the dry river bed of the Kaveri. And it's very different from how I am used to seeing the Kaveri in Karnataka. There it's a fairly narrow river, full of trees, forests all around it. But here, down here in the plains, it's grand. It's extremely broad here. It's probably, in my estimation, about a kilometer or more is the width here. But at this point in time, it's completely dry because I'm in March and all the water of the Kaveri has been already dammed up in two major reservoirs upstream. One is the Krishnaraja Sagar near Mysore, and the other is the Mettur Dam near Salem. And we are approaching summer now, so there is absolutely no flow in the Kaveri, and I am able to stand in the middle of the river. So summer is approaching. I am here at 12 noon. The sun is almost overhead, beating down on my head. But we are not here to talk about nature on this scale, though it's extremely grand, because I can see it behind the camera is the Kallanai, which was a dam built by Karigala Cholan 2000 years back to again control the flow of water and help in irrigation. And there is a gentle breeze blowing, though it's extremely hot. Not much of birds chirping because there are trees far away, but it's more shrubland than forests here because this is down in the plains. But we are not here to discuss nature, you know that, not on this scale, however grand it may be. We are here to discuss nature on a much grander scale of the movement of the sun around the earth, Sauramana. So now I am on approaching March 21st. March 21st is actually the vernal equinox when the sun will be on top of the equator. Tiruchirappalli is about 11 degrees north of equator, so it will take another month and a half for the sun to come exactly overhead here in Tiruchirappalli, up there, and that would be peak summer here. But what is this movement of the sun on top of the equator, moving north of the equator? That is Uttarayana and Dakshinayana. This is one topic which everybody is aware of. So you have the Tropic of Capricorn, you have the equator, Tropic of Cancer, and the sun moves up and down, Uttarayana and Dakshinayana. Every Hindu is aware of that. There is no secrets here, but I will still, for the sake of completeness, I will illustrate to you using a stellarium model this movement of the sun north and south, Uttarayana and Dakshinayana, because it's the same definition which Surya Siddhanta also gives. But there is one misconception that people have which I need to correct. Most people believe that Makara Sankranti is the beginning of Uttarayana, January 14th. But then if you follow science, you will realize that December 21st is winter solstice. And from that point onwards, the sun is moving up north. So that is the beginning of Uttarayana, not January 14th, not Makara Sankranti. So how did this misconception come about? What led to it? So I will correct my statement. Makara Sankranti is not the beginning of Uttarayana today. What I mean is, it was the beginning of Uttarayana a long time back, thousands of years back. And because it was the beginning of Uttarayana a long time back, that memory has carried over and that tradition is still being maintained that Makara Sankranti is beginning of Uttarayana. So what changed from that long time back to today? That requires a separate episode, so I will not go into that in this episode. I will reserve that for a future episode because that has to do with the topic of Sayana and Nirayana, which I have briefly mentioned in an earlier episode. But this episode is all about Uttarayana and Dakshinayana. I will show it to you using a stellarium model I'm going to roll the animation now. Take a look. Okay, let's get started. In this episode, we are going to take a detailed look at the phenomena of Uttarayana and Dakshinayana. Now, of course, everybody knows about Uttarayana and Dakshinayana. There is no secret here, but as you will see as this episode unfolds, there are many subtleties about this which you may not be aware of. So let's start with this view. This view is familiar to you from the previous episode, from all the Sauramana episodes. So here is Meshadi. The sun is at Meshadi on April 14th. And that point is 180 degrees opposite of Chitra nakshatra and very close to Revati nakshatra. So far, Meshadi has been anchoring everything that we have been doing. This is the beginning of the rashi mandala. This is the start of the nakshatra mandala. And as you saw in Adhika Masa, the attempt is to keep the Falguna Amavasya as close to Meshadi as possible. It keeps falling back, but then an Adhika Masa comes and it pushes the Falguna Amavasya close to Meshadi. So this has been the anchor all this while. And in an earlier episode, I have told you to ignore this point which is marked as 0 degrees because that is something which has been decided by the Western astronomers. Now, starting from this episode, I am going to make a U-turn. This 0 degrees is not just something that has been defined by Western astronomers. This is also of interest in Hindu astronomy and plays a very important part in the Hindu calendar. So from now on, the next few episodes, this point becomes the important one and not Meshadi. And it's not just this one point, there are a set of 4 points which become very important. One is the 0 degree point, another is the exact opposite, 180 degrees, and also the 90 degrees point and the 270 degrees point. So why are these important? That is the first part of this episode. And once you understand that, Uttarayana and Dakshinayana will become almost trivial. It's very easy to grasp them. So let me start by showing you what these 4 points, 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees and 270 degrees really imply. So as a first step, I shifted the date to March 20th, 2021, and the sun is at the 0 degree point. Now, in Western astronomy, this point is known as a vernal equinox. And the opposite point, 180 degrees, is known as the autumnal equinox. In Hindu astronomy, this point is known as the vasant vishuvat. And the exact opposite point here is known as the Sharad Vishuvat. And the sun gets to the Sharad Vishuvat on either 22nd or 23rd of September, 6 months after Vasanta Vishuvat. So the term Vishuvat in English is known as equinox, and you may be familiar with that term. Equinox is the day on which, in any point on the earth, day and night are equal in duration. Next, we will look at the 90 degree point. The sun reaches that point on June 21st, 2021, or 20th or 21st in all the years. And the name of that point in Western astronomy is Solstice. It's known as the summer solstice. Whereas in Hindu astronomy, it's known as Uttarayana. Now, this may come as a surprise to you. You may think I'm changing the definition of Uttarayana. Hang in there, I'm not changing the definition. In Sanskrit, some terms have multiple meanings, related but multiple meanings. So this is a new meaning of the term Uttarayana that I am showing to you. It is actually the solstitial point. Summer solstice point is known as Uttarayana. And the corresponding point at the opposite end is known as Dakshinayana. The sun reaches Uttarayana point on 20th or 21st June of every year on the Christian calendar, and it reaches the Dakshinayana point on 21st or 22nd of December every year on the Christian calendar. So these are the four new points that become important in the next few episodes, not meshadi. And just like vishuvat was the term which in English is known as equinox, ayana is the term in English that is known as solstice. And Uttarayana is the northern solstice and Dakshinayana is the southern solstice. In English they are known as summer solstice and winter solstice. Now, why are these 4 points important? How does it matter? Why pick this and call it 0 degrees? What is so special? I mean, there are so many points all over the place. Yeah, we already have meshadi, which has been the central point for us in all the previous episodes. So why bother with these 4 points? What is so special about them? To show you that, I have to change this model itself. I'm going to introduce a new model. In fact, I have done this in a few of the earlier tutorials. And now I'm going to really make use of the new model. And this is the new model. Take a look. In stellarium, this projection is known as the orthographic projection. It looks three-dimensional and it looks like a sphere, a gola. But this is not the bhugola, this is not the terrestrial sphere. Instead, this is the khagola, the celestial sphere. So what does celestial sphere mean? So since the earth on which we are living is a sphere, we model the entire space surrounding the earth also as a sphere, for simplicity's sake. Now in reality, we do not know the shape of space because space is infinite. We have not gone to the limits of space. We neither know how big it is, nor do we know what shape it is. But for modeling purposes, for better understanding, for visual representation, we model the entire space surrounding the earth as a sphere of some finite radius and make it fit on a laptop screen or even smaller smartphone screen. So this is really Brahmanda, which Brahma created, Brahmanda. And Brahma placed the earth in the center of Brahmanda. But in astronomical terms in Sanskrit, this is not referred to as Brahmanda, but as Khagola, which surrounds Bhugola completely. Bhugola is in the center of this. So that is the idea of the celestial sphere. And across the celestial sphere, you see the familiar ecliptic is running, but now you see only half the ecliptic because the other half is on the other side. You can't see the full ecliptic. Also, now I will do one additional trick here. I'm going to turn on a few more lines. So now you see that the ecliptic is visible, half of it, but it is tilting. And it is tilting with respect to this line. So this line is horizontal, ecliptic is tilting to that. So what is this line? This line is nothing but the equator, but a celestial equator, not the terrestrial equator. Everything on the sphere is celestial. So once again, the idea is on the terrestrial sphere you have an equator, project that outwards to infinite distance, and that becomes the celestial equator. Same way, this red line you see up here is the celestial Tropic of Cancer. You project the Tropic of Cancer outwards for infinite distance, and that is this line. And you project the terrestrial Tropic of Capricorn outwards for infinite distance, and you get this line. And now you start seeing certain things. You see that the ecliptic is tilted with respect to this line, and it seems to be contained within these two red lines. It doesn't exceed those red lines. It stays within those two red lines. Correct? And that is what makes these 4 points we are talking about important. But before I go into that, why is the ecliptic tilted? You know from high school that the Earth's axis is tilted by 23.5 degrees. With respect to what? With respect to the orbital plane of the Sun, the Moon, and all the planets in a geocentric model. Whereas what stellarium is doing is it's showing the Earth's axis as being vertical and the ecliptic as being tilted. So it doesn't matter whichever way you look at it. With respect to each other, they are tilted. This is the equator, this is the ecliptic, and this is 23.5 degrees angle. And this representation is wonderful for us. Why? Because we want to discuss Uttarayana and Dakshinayana, and you can clearly now see the ecliptic is tilted in a north-south direction, because this is north up here. You can see the N there. Which means that when all the planets, the Sun, the Moon, everything are rotating on this ecliptic, they are apparently going north-south. In reality, they are just going round and round and round the ecliptic. You have seen that in all the 14 episodes so far. But now I want to emphasize this north-south movement, and that is why I came to this model. This model shows only half the ecliptic, but it shows the north-south movement. The previous model showed the entire ecliptic, that's why I stayed with that for 14 episodes. But now, because we are discussing Uttarayana and Dakshinayana, I have to come to this model to show you the north-south movement. So now let's take a look at those 4 points, what happened to them. So here is Vasanta Vishvat, and see where it is. It is sitting exactly where the ecliptic intersects the equator. That means on this date, the Sun comes to this point, it will be right overhead the equator. So if you are living on the equator, at noon you go out, of course morning, evening it will not be overhead. That's because the Earth is spinning, Sun will rise slowly in the east, go up, 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 up. When it comes right on top, on March 20th or 21st, it will literally be right on top of your head if you are on the equator. So this term Vasanta Vishvat actually indicates two things. One is this point on the ecliptic, where the ecliptic intersects the equator. The second is this date when the Sun comes to that point, 20th or 21st March. The date is also known as Vasanta Vishvat. Both the point and the date are called Vasanta Vishvat. In English, this would be vernal equinox. Vishuvat is equinox. What about the other point exactly opposite to this? Here it is, Sharad Vishvat. Again, the ecliptic is intersecting the equator a second time. And that point is known as Sharad Vishvat. And the date when the Sun comes to this point, that is 22nd or 23rd September, is also known as Sharad Vishvat. Both the point and the date are Sharad Vishvat. Now, what is Vasanta and Sharad? These are seasons, but I'm going to cover seasons in a separate episode, so I will not dive deeper into that as to why they are called Vasanta Vishvat and Sharad Vishvat. But in English, Sharad Vishvat would be known as autumnal equinox. Same thing, because Vasanta is vernal and Sharad is autumn. Now, what about the remaining 2 points? So let's come here. Let me go to Uttarayana first. So Uttarayana is up here. That is where the ecliptic intersects the celestial Tropic of Cancer. Meaning that is a limit beyond which the ecliptic does not go further north. It comes up, it comes from here up till this point and then starts turning back downwards. It doesn't cross this point further up north. So it's the northern limit. Uttarayana. In English, that is known as summer solstice. Ayana is the equivalent of solstice. And what is Dakshinayana? Here is Dakshinayana, and that is where the ecliptic intersects the celestial Tropic of Capricorn. And the point when the sun comes there, the date when the sun comes there, is 21st or 22nd December. That date is also known as Dakshinayana date. So this is why these 4 points have been picked, and Dakshinayana in English would be winter solstice. Ayana is the solstice, and Dakshina, you know, is south. So we call it northern Ayana and southern Ayana, Uttarayana, Dakshinayana. Whereas in English they are known as summer solstice and winter solstice. So now you get a feel as to why these 4 points are special. Meshadi is still there, yeah, but it is no longer relevant to us in this context. When you talk about Uttarayana and Dakshinayana, meshadi does not matter. When you talk about rashi, nakshatra and adhikamasa, meshadi is very important. It's the anchor. But now our focus is shifted to these 4 points. So if you understand this, it's very easy now to come to the standard definition of this term, Uttarayana, which is an entire 6-month period when the sun is moving north, as opposed to just this point up north. Now I am talking about the entire period. So I will show you what that means. So I'm going to roll the animation now. Take a look. You can see now that the sun is moving to the north. It started from the Dakshinayana point and it has come this far north. I paused the animation here because now the sun has reached 14th January, which is Makara Sankranti. There is an important topic connected to this, but I will come back to this a little bit later in this animation and explain to you what that topic is. So let me now continue the animation, and you see the sun is progressing to the north. It's continuing to progress towards the north. It's approaching the celestial equator, crossed the vasanta vishuvat, progressing still to the north, approaching the celestial Tropic of Cancer, approaching the Uttarayana point, and now it has reached the Uttarayana point. Now this entire period, when it left the Dakshinayana point and finally reached the Uttarayana point, is known as Uttarayana. In other words, when the sun reaches the Uttarayana point, that is the end of Uttarayana. When the sun reaches the Uttarayana, the northern solstice point, that is the end of Uttarayana, the northern progress of the sun. So the word ayana has a second meaning. Here it meant solstice, whereas here it means progress. That is the meaning of ayana. It is progressing to the north, and the progress to the north ends when it reaches the Uttarayana, the northern solstice point. So Sanskrit uses the same term with different meanings. Now let's shift over to the second part of this animation, Dakshinayana. Now the sun is moving to the south, progressing towards the south. Dakshinayana, southern progress. It's approaching the celestial equator, once again crossed the vishuvat, this time the Sharad vishuvat it crossed, and it's approaching the celestial Tropic of Capricorn. It's coming close to the Dakshinayana point, the Dakshinayana, the southern solstice point. And it has reached that point. So when the sun reaches the Dakshinayana point, the southern solstice point, that is the end of Dakshinayana, the southern progress. Solstice, progress, both are ayana. Dakshina is of course south in both cases. So when you reach the southern solstice, that is the end of the southern progress. Dakshinayana marks the end of Dakshinayana. So this is all about Uttarayana and Dakshinayana, each 6-month period, 2 halves of a solar year, of a Sauravarsha. Now, I had mentioned to you that Makara Sankranti has an important topic connected with this. What is that topic? So here's the point. The Surya Siddhanta, on which I have based my entire Ahargana series till now, says that Makara Sankranti is the beginning of Uttarayana. Now, Surya Siddhanta does mention the 2 vishuvat points and the 2 ayana points. And 2 verses later, it says Makara Sankranti, the beginning of Uttarayana. But if you see what happens here, by the time of Makara Sankranti, the sun has already moved this much to the north. So here is the celestial Tropic of Capricorn, and by Makara Sankranti, the sun has come this far north. Now, if according to Surya Siddhanta, if I say this is the beginning of Uttarayana, then the period preceding it is Dakshinayana. But you saw that during that period, the sun was moving north. So I have a problem on my hands that a period which we call Dakshinayana, sun is moving to the north, northern progress. Uttarayana is happening. But according to the Surya Siddhanta definition, that period is Dakshinayana. It's part of the tail end of Dakshinayana. This cannot be correct. So, is it that the Surya Siddhanta was wrong? My answer to that question is no. The Surya Siddhanta was right at that point in time when it was written. Indeed, at the time when Surya Siddhanta was written, Makara Sankranti was the beginning of Dakshinayana. But something changed from that point to today. And that change is caused by something called the precession of the equinox. Now, the Sanskrit term for precession of the equinox is also ayana. One more meaning of ayana. So this brings us to the topic of nirayana and sayana. And that topic deserves a separate episode for me to explain that clearly to you. So right now I will just point out that in this episode I am deviating from the definition given in Surya Siddhanta. I am using the definition of modern astronomy which matches our terminology of Uttarayana, northern progress, correctly. And that means Uttarayana is starting at Dakshinayana point, and that is December 21st or 22nd, depending on leap year or not, and not Makara Sankranti. So until the later episode where I will explain exactly what changed, you will have to wait to understand why I still maintain Surya Siddhanta was correct at the time it was written in the past. So this brings me to the end of this episode. Now you know all about the 2 vishuvats, the 2 ayanas, and you know about the difference between ayana the solstice and ayana the progress, Uttarayana point, Dakshinayana point, Uttarayana period, Dakshinayana period. So as always, before I close this episode, I thank you for your patience and thank you very much for watching. So now you know all about Uttarayana and Dakshinayana. And while you were watching that video, I moved actually to Kallanai. That's what you see behind me, the dam built by Karigala Cholan 2000 years back. Of course, it's quite possible that a lot of upgrades have been done. I have to wait for the loud motorcycles to pass before I can continue. So a lot of upgrades possibly have been done, but there is a record that the dam was built in this exact same spot 2000 years back, and the dam has existed here for 2000 years. And it is still functional for the same purpose, which is of controlling the flow of the Kaveri to help in irrigation. Good. So we know about Uttarayana and Dakshinayana now. Now what is left? Can we move to Ritus, the seasons? No. Because while everybody knows about Uttarayana and Dakshinayana, not everybody knows that there is another two-part division of a year called Devayana and Pitrayana. Except that they start at different points from Uttarayana and Dakshinayana. Hence, the entire period when the sun is north of the celestial equator is Devayana. And the period when the sun is south of the celestial equator is Pitrayana. And why these names Devayana and Pitrayana? That is what makes it interesting. And I will get into the details of that in the next episode. It will be very similar to the Uttarayana and similar to Dakshinayana which you saw just now, not very different at all. But it is the tradition that goes behind it that makes it very interesting. And to that tradition is tied another very important Hindu festival, which is Pitru Paksha. In fact, Pitru Paksha is the period when the sun switches from Devayana to Pitrayana. So I will talk more about that in my next episode. Until then, my sincere thanks to you for having watched this video and for having watched this series all along. And please do forward the link of this series to all your contacts so that more and more people become aware of the astronomy behind the Hindu calendar. So until I see you again in the next episode, thank you very much for watching. Take care and bye-bye.